Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hey everybody, Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of the Listen Up podcast, and I feature top leaders in healthcare. This episode is brought to you by Listen Up Hearing Centers. I help patients to effectively treat their hearing loss so that they can connect better with friends and family and remain, most importantly, independent. The reason I'm so passionate about hearing loss is because I lost my brother Robbie twice. First from the hearing loss from the radiation to his brain tumor, and then again when he passed away. I only care for ears. I'm the E of ENT. I've taken care of tens of thousands of patients with hearing loss and performed over 10,000 ear surgeries over the past 20 years. I'm the founder of Listen Up Hearing Centers and an author of the book of the same name, Listen Up, A Physician's Guide to Effectively Treating Your Hearing Loss. If you want to learn more about the practice or the book, go to listenuphearing.com. That's listenuphearing.com. I'm excited to have this guest today. Today, we have Dr. Dusty Jessen. She is the creator of 5 Keys Communication, and she's the leader of that organization as well. She's been practicing audiology for 20 years. She was drawn to the field of communication disorders after experiencing firsthand the stress and frustration that accompanies hearing loss. Her goal is to educate and empower people affected by hearing loss. I love that goal because that's the goal of what we're doing here today. Dusty, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is great. So, how'd you end? So you mentioned in the intro, we talked about firsthand experience. That's oftentimes how people get into this field of hearing loss. What was your pathway? Tell us a little bit about that experience or that nugget that you shared with us already.
Well, there were 2. I had a grandmother who had a cochlear implant. She was actually one of the first people to be bilaterally implanted a long time ago. And so family get-togethers, I experienced her struggles, trying to talk with her. And then later, when I was already in the communication disorders program, bringing family members in to test their hearing, brought my parents in, had my mom in the booth. I'm like, Mom, raise your hand when you hear the beep. And my dad and I are hearing the beeps outside of the booth. And I'm like, Mom, raise your hand when you hear the beep. And it was that severe at certain, she had a high frequency hearing loss and she'd been coping so well, she didn't know it. And so she was my first diagnosis and has been my communication partner through all of the journey. She's the first one that I put new hearing aids on every time something new comes out. So it's nice to have that firsthand connection.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, interestingly, as a quick aside, what it tells me is how amazing people can kind of hide or compensate for their hearing loss. I mean, it just is amazing how people work really hard to overcome it, and they and perhaps the people around them don't even realize it. So you practice clinical audiology, correct? And you're taking care of hearing loss people of all various likes, kinds, and flavors and spectrums, right? And so, one of the things that led me to connect with you, Dusty, is your 5 Keys Communication program. And so, before we get into the specifics of what it is, tell us a little bit about at some point, I suspect you had an aha moment, like, I should do this. So what led up to that? What were the experiences that led up to that particular conclusion?
Yeah. Well, I was at a AAA conference when it was here in Denver in 2007, and I went to a talk by Dr. Robert Sweeto, and he was talking about counseling for hearing aid fittings. And that was my aha moment, that the counseling and the education that we provide our patients is really what sets us apart from them being able to go get devices online or get an amplifier somewhere else.
Sure.
So from that point, I started creating handouts and doing group classes and just trying to have some kind of an educational system that people could take home with them. And what I found was that the photocopied handouts that I created were boring and they were not being read, So I knew that there had to be something that was more fun and more systematic. And that's how the 5 Keys eventually kind of evolved.
Yeah. So it is fun, right? There's a dog theme in it, correct?
There is. Yeah. I chose a dog as the mascot and kind of the image of the program because I wanted it to be applicable for all ages, my mom's got hearing loss, my grandma's got hearing loss. I have friends who have hearing loss, and none of them want to see pictures of their grandparent or their daughter, on the book. So the dog speaks to everybody. The pictures are funny, dog eating hot dogs is kind of funny. Bright colors so that there's some brand awareness so that patients know that what they're getting is part of a program. Because I think so often we give them a photocopied handout of communication strategies and
an ad hoc program where you just kind of throw it together, right?
Right, exactly. And so they don't recognize that as oral rehab. They recognize it as, oh yeah, my provider gave me a dumb handout and it's boring. So even though it's important. So I knew that it had to be bright and colorful. And at the time, thankfully, I had access to some good graphic designers in a networking group that I was in, and they helped me put my handouts into a booklet format. And that's how the 5 Keys to Communication Success handbook was born.
Does the dog actually have a name?
Yes. Well, my kids, when they were little, they hate that I tell this story now because they're teenagers and this is cool. But they named him Henry the Healthy Hearing Hound. So he is affectionately known as Henry.
So the dog is your dog?
No, that's the image of the dog. So if I was the photographer of the dog, I think I'd be in Bermuda on a private island right now because I paid a lot of money for those images. They are stock images. In fact, you'll see the little Jack Russell Terrier. Sometimes I see him on the back of like a plumbing truck with plumbing tools on. And I'm like, that's my dog, but it's really not my dog.
Got it. So it's a stock photo that you've kind of used as the theme. Oh, okay. I thought for a second there, like, yeah, that's my dog. It's like my kid's dog, right?
Right. I wish. I do. I am a dog lover. We foster dogs. We've had hundreds of dogs through our house in the last few years, but that's not one of them.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And so, so what are the 5 keys? Can you tell me about those?
Yeah, for sure. So the 5 keys are what we counsel our patients about all the time, but they're put into a system called 5 keys. So it's the speaker, the listener, the environment, technology, and practice. And as I'm going through those with people, I point out the importance of the 4th key, technology, being number 4 and not number 1. Because they're not going to be successful with their treatment if the speaker, the listener, don't do their parts to effectively communicate, if they don't modify their environment to be conducive to successful communication, if they don't address those 3, which are on the patient and their communication partners, then the 4th, that technology can only do so much. And so it really is getting them to understand that they play an active role in the treatment process, that the hearing aids are not going to do it all, and that they have to be a team player. And then the practice part just shows them that it doesn't happen overnight. You have to do it over and over again.
Well, let's talk about everything but the technology, right? Let's talk about the first, right? So it's the patient, right? Mm-hmm. And so what things do you, obviously, some of the things that come right to mind to me during this conversation is like self-advocacy, right? Like the willingness to tell people perhaps that you have a hearing problem and that you might be difficult, rather than what some people in the hearing space, the imposter or faker who acts like they're and they don't understand what the heck anybody's saying. So what other aspects do you try to train people about in terms of the individual with the hearing?
Sure. So that's the listener, and that is effective listening strategies, anticipating what's going to be said, planning ahead when you go to a play or a meeting or something, so you know what the program is. Planning
ahead to get a favorable location. Right?
Yep.
If you're in a meeting and somebody's doing a slide presentation, you're probably going to want to sit at the front of the room by where the presenter is.
Right. Which that kind of goes along with the environment key as well, because it is the planning, and then that's modifying your environment. Being someone who wants to participate in the conversation. I remember my grandmother used to take each of us grandchildren aside into a separate bedroom, and we would each have our half an hour with her where she sat face to face with us, and we loved it because we loved when we had Granny Catherine time, it's my turn. And she took that initiative to go, okay, you're coming with me. We're going to sit face to face and have this conversation. And that was her part as the listener. So it's really, to us, it's common sense stuff, but it's to someone who has hearing loss and they've created some bad habits, like talking from the other room in the house. That's the speaker as well, but the listener should be the one to go, hold on, I'm going to come in and be in the same room with you. So just little things like that.
Or the advice I give, which is don't respond.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the answer is if the speaker wants to communicate with you and it's that important, they should co-locate themselves into the room you're in rather
Right.
than the way around. And
Yeah.
some of that has to do with conversational dynamics, et cetera. But that's what I always say. So just ignore them. Don't, because when you acknowledge it, then they think you should have heard it.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. I often give my couples the assignment, and it seems so silly, but I call it the finger touch game. And so this is the speaker and the listener doing a practice assignment. And I'll say, for a full day, I want you to touch each other's fingertips before you start speaking to each other. So you are not allowed to talk to each other until you touch fingertips. And
That's
I
good.
laugh and I say, no, it's stupid and everything. But they're like, yeah, we didn't say what all day long. We didn't have any arguments. We had great conversations the whole day.
That's a great tip. That's a really great tip. I like that one a lot. And so that's the listener. I mean, and you are talking a little bit about the speaker too. So what are some of the other things? So obviously, there are some speakers you can modify and some you can't, right? So one of the things I talk to hearing loss patients about is I guess the word, it depends where you are in the structure, right? Like, so obviously, if you're the CEO running the meeting and you have hearing loss, you can make anybody repeat yourself. If you're an attorney in a courtroom, you really can't make the judge repeat themselves. So it really depends where you are falling hierarchical in the conversation, right?
That's a good point. For sure.
So what do you say in terms of the speakers?
Well, oftentimes with my population, they're retired. And so the main person that they're struggling with the most is their spouse. So that's kind of easy because that's modifiable. For my people who are still working, we have to work through some of those, issues in terms of speaker not being afraid to give the speaker feedback about, how they're sounding. I have this issue with church a lot with my patients. Like, there's one pastor that they just cannot hear. And so I told them, you know what, it is your job to go let them know, because if you're struggling, other people are struggling too. So don't be afraid. That's the advocacy part too. But, it's getting their attention first. It's enunciating clearly. It's not talking with, your hand near your mouth. Just habits that people have
not doing the dishes with the water running with your back to the listener and thinking that they're going to be able to actually hear you as you speak down the garbage disposal.
Exactly. Or vice versa, when the listener's doing dishes and you're back there and all they hear is the water running in their ears. So it's kind of it's common sense stuff, but when it's organized into bullet points, they tend to remember that and take that responsibility because they have a part, they have a symbol that corresponds to their role in this treatment process.
So I will share because it's top of mind. My roommate from medical school, he's a physician, he's a radiologist, but his mother, she's wonderful. She was a kindergarten teacher, sweetest lady. She's in her early 90s and she's hearing loss, right? And so he sends me the audiogram and says, what do I do? I said, well, you go get hearing aids and get her hearing loss treated. And, we went through the whole over the counter. And I said, no, you need, you need somebody. So anyway, he emailed me today. He goes, Mark, guess what? You're right. I go, what do you mean? She goes, she told me that she heard the sermon at church for the first time on Sunday. And the second thing she said was, could you please bring some oil over because my garage door is squeaking a lot. And I never heard that before. So, I mean, these are the things that people, she's like, he sent me the email she sent. The one thing that was so profound was, I didn't realize how much I wasn't hearing. Right. So anyway, as you're talking about this, I was just like, that's the amazing thing that, because you mentioned church and more power to her. She's been going, but, if you're going to spend the time to try to connect in church, it'd be a lot easier if you could actually hear what's being said within the celebration. Right.
For sure. Yeah, it is eye-opening for people when they realize how much they were actually missing.
Yeah, we're so blessed to be able to do this. So third, not technology, environment.
Yep. Environment. So this is where we talk about where you're sitting, the lighting, the proximity to people, reducing background noise, choosing a booth. I have it all organized by environment. So there's, dining out and on the phone. And so, for example, on the phone, don't be in a noisy place trying to have a phone conversation. Get in your car where it's quiet, or go into a bathroom, or, if you're at a restaurant, go to the restroom if you have to take a call. Can't expect to be able to hear in these situations. And they oftentimes think they're going to be able to when they spend $6,000 on hearing aids. So they need this. It's not just realistic expectations. It is critical realistic expectations,
Or understanding that, as much as we don't want to admit it, everyone has problems hearing in background noise if the background noise is significant enough.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And so that's one of the other problems is normalizing hearing in environments that are difficult when you have normal hearing, and then comparing yourself to that. Because I think they think, oh, everybody's hearing perfectly in these environments. They're not. They're struggling too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and then so really actually probably maybe the more subtle one is 5. We skip 4, which is the technology. I'll leave that up to your expertise, and we can, people can digest that endlessly. So these are, to me, the much more interesting things.
Yeah. So 5 is practice. I have little worksheets that I'll give them. I call them successful communication plans, and those are free to download off of my website. And I write them a little practice assignment. So like the finger touch game is a practice. I'll tell them I want you to go to 3 restaurants this week, and each time try sitting in a different area. Once in a booth, once by the bar, and see what's better for you. I want you to try putting your back to the restaurant first, and then maybe try putting your back to the wall and see which is better. So, it's just, you got to repeat this over and over again. And I'll often share with them a story that the 5 keys has been personal for me because I have vocal cord dysfunction. So I will wake up one morning and have 0 voice. And it's usually allergies.
That's an unpredictable struggle.
It is. Especially when you're a public speaker. So at the time I had been going around doing talks about the 5 keys, just to small like Rotary clubs and clubs and things. And twice I woke up that morning with no voice, but I couldn't cancel on them at the last minute. I was the speaker. So I went. I'm not sick. So I go, and probably wouldn't have had it been post-COVID, but this was pre-COVID when you were still okay to go out with a scratchy voice.
Right.
And I had to use the 5 keys to make it work. As the speaker, I was told them, I advocated for myself, told them I need you to listen carefully. I put forth as much effort as I could squawk out. Listeners, I told them, you're going to have to pay really close attention. You're going to have to watch me. The environments where I really modified things, I made them all scooch their chairs, close into me. We turned off one time it was in a deli that I was speaking. So we turned off the coolers so we didn't have the background noise. We shut the doors so we didn't hear the traffic noise. So I was teaching them the 5 keys as we were modifying it for that specific situation. And we were practicing it. And then technology was interesting. Luckily I had a PowerPoint that I could use as a backup technology. The microphone that they had present was technology. So I really, cranked that sucker up and I swallowed it as I talked to try to get it as close as possible. Right. So it's just, you don't have to be someone with hearing loss to practice the 5 keys. It's just general communication, and any situation, whether you have good hearing or not, you should be looking at these, and practicing effective communication, successful communication practices.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so if they want to learn more about this, Dusty, do they go to your clinical practice website, or how do they find it?
Nope, I keep my clinical practice is totally separate from 5 keys. My website is 5keys.org, the number 5, the word keys.org. And it's all on there. I now have an online program that goes with the book, or it can be used separately. So what we were finding is that not everybody's going to read a book. Compliance is always an issue when it comes to oral rehab, and trying to get them, as you probably have experienced, trying to get them to read an entire book doesn't always happen. Or if they read it in the beginning, they forget what they read down the road. And so the online program is just snippets of education that's delivered to them via weekly emails. And it just is little reminders to them about each of the 5 keys, gives them a little practice assignment. And all of my part of my program is branded to the practice. So each practice who uses the program has the option to brand the books to their practice, to brand the emails. So it's also a good touch point that just keeps that practice top of mind for that patient when they're seeing stuff about OTCs and all the stuff like, oh, I got my email from my provider with more good education for me. So it's, it's a little bit of marketing probably, but in an educational way.
Well, I mean, this is a wonderful program, and I would posit that somebody who has the insights and abilities to put this is probably a fabulous clinician. And so if people want to get a hold of you on the clinical side, how would they do that?
Thank you. My practice is in Littleton, Colorado, and my website is my practice is called Columbine Hearing Care. So the website is columbinecares, CARES.com.
Okay, great. And so, I think you're on LinkedIn, no?
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn,
So
Facebook.
that would be another place for people to find Dusty. Dusty, tell me, what's your favorite sound? I love asking people this because it's just fascinating, all the different answers.
Yeah, for sure. I think it changes, but most recently, since I have grumpy teenage boys who are very sullen, when I get to hear one of them laugh, and I know laughter is probably a common one, but this is very rare that a grumpy teenage boy actually has a good belly laugh. That makes me really happy because, you worry about the kids sometimes when they're going through the teenage years. So good
Yeah,
laugh.
and not for anything, but I think in this particular environment in the post-COVID, it's even more challenging. Not that I'm not trying to say it wasn't challenging when I was a teenager, but I think it's an added level. So yeah, that's great when your kid has a deep, sincere laugh. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, this is Dr. Dusty Jessen, and she is the creator of 5 Keys Communication. This is a great, fascinating program. I'm really, I want to thank you for putting something like this together because, it's actually, it's 1, 2, 3, and 5. It's not 4, right? It's not the technology. And I know people want to believe that because that's easy, but it's all of those other things are so important. And even it enables you to understand your hearing loss better, right? Like, why do you have hearing loss? Well, sometimes it's your ears are bad, but the environment's bad. It's not all just your ears, right?
Right. It comes down to communication breakdowns, not just hearing loss. Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your program. If people want to learn more about it, they can go to 5 Keys. That's the number 5keys.org, right?
Yeah.
To check on the website. This has been a great contribution to the hearing treatment community. I really appreciate your work. This is awesome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.